Today we come down to the shop, and I was so glad the way yesterday played out, because now I have a real opportunity to take my time and do this. What happened, if you follow along with our daily videos, what had happened yesterday, we went for a ride on the RD, and this part was out drying in 40-degree temperatures, and what had really happened was, and I was hoping it would be dry enough I could run down and wet sand it and get the white on. Well, I said, well, you know, it'll be nice tomorrow, I'll get it done. I'll do it today. We're trying to prepare for Turbo Steve's job here. But the way it played out, it worked to my advantage, because now I have plenty of time to wet sand and detail this out. And it's a super rainy day. And I'm not sure you see the raindrops falling, but it is definitely not going to be a day we're going to get to do any painting. So had I rushed yesterday and got this in white, I just would have made a lot of extra work for myself. And I guess there's a lesson there I can share. And the lesson really is, you really can't rush this stuff. I wish there was a way you could rush it, but there really isn't. Now I wanted to share something I think is significant. If you really are interested in doing very, very high quality finishing, and I mean the top level where there's really not a whole lot better, I can suggest you check out this website, AMMO NYC, AMMO NYC. And the reason is I watch his videos all the time, and I always learn something from him. Now, and he made a good point on the video I watched last night, and I want to share it. So the last project he had that I watched, there goes the phone. We haven't even started the day yet, and they're selling me aluminum siding. This is really funny. But again, this AMMO NYC, AMMO NYC, it's really interesting, has loads of good finishing information. Now the guys that do this are working on Ferraris and Porsches, but motorcycles are pretty much the same thing, and they were dealing with the same issues that I'm dealing with. But he made a point that I thought was so valid. I had never made this point before. And he said he went to these various body shops, and each one has a little bit different way of doing it. They use different primers, different compounds, different sanding things and whatever. But the bottom line is they all wind up with this really incredibly good finish. And I was thinking, well, you know, it's the same whether it's model airplanes or cars or motorcycles. You just have to find, and he made the point, you have to find a system that works for you. Now, just as an example, when I restored the RD, and I restored that took an incredible amount of time. One of the things I learned was the paint, that yellow color, was so critical, because I had looked at many, and I come from that era when that was the color of choice for Yamaha race bikes. And so I wanted to get the color right, I wanted to get everything right. But again, that bottom line is, no matter what you do, you've got to find a thing that works for you. And I can pass along, and I'm happy to pass along what I've learned in over 50 years of doing this. But basically, there's always going to be something that's a little bit different for each project that you work on. And now I'm going back. This is a very rare picture of my 1972 Suzuki, painted with acrylic lacquer. It's one of the few. In fact, if you look on a tail section, that's my parrot, my macaw, scarlet macaw. It wound up on the cover of a magazine, won a lot of trophies and whatnot, and we used it at the various AMAR things. But I do things totally different now. From that day to this day, I've learned a lot. The finishing process over the years, from the 70s to the 60s to the 80s to the 90s, it's constantly evolving. And what I'm trying to share, especially with this project that we're working on now, is you can pick up things from me, you can pick up things from AMMO or from these various places, but you really have to find out what's going to work for you and do a little experimenting along the way. So my point was, if I had rushed this through yesterday, I might have the part done already, and I'd have a rainy day to work on something else. But now I have the opportunity to take some 600 wet and dry sandpaper, and I am really going to spend the better part of today fixing every little tiny flaw. And you can see this is where there's some work I did. I put that reinforcement in the back here. It's an ongoing thing, because my goal is to make this part better than a factory. And it will be. It's only a question of time. It will be perfect, I hope, when I'm done with it. And I have a lot of little techniques that I've used over the years have evolved. I've changed ways I do things, but I'm always trying to share the latest thing that works for me. So let me get busy. Now, one tip we learned, and I did this, we actually learned this from Mark's latest restoration. He wound up getting some of this INDASA P600 sandpaper. This, of course, is 600 grit. Now, this sandpaper has turned out to be a real big part of and again, it's a thing that's evolved from using 3M paper, and which we still have some in inventory. But this is far, far nicer material, I think. Works better for the primers I use and the color. It's good for color sanding and for prime sanding. Now, one of the things, and I have tried to emphasize, you can always skip steps. And again, I'm mimicking the words from Ammo NYC. He's doing a car, and it took them weeks to do the finish. They were baking it overnight and then sanding it, baking it, sanding it, baking. And I thought, well, wow, I'm basically doing the same thing on a smaller scale with I'm sure, a much smaller budget. I'm sure when you do this, the kind of restoration he's doing, you're talking about 6 figures. So anyway, we're going to try to pass on the information. This sandpaper is one of the things, as I've said, it evolved over the years. I've had good luck with it. Now, the idea of sanding this is I'm going to be really gentle about it. I don't want to go through. In other words, I don't want to sand all the primer off. I want to detail sand it. As soon as I see, like right here, a spot coming through, I'm done. Because remember, this is a very, very light coat of primer that I put on here. Even if it was warmer yesterday, if it was 70 degrees, this would have dried and I could have, well, but again, it's the thing, and I try to emphasize it because one of the things, when you're trying to help people learn how to finish, it's a skill that you have to learn, like playing golf or like cooking or what, it's a skill. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, and a lot of them work very easy. A lot of them are a little bit extra work. I don't concern myself with the extra work. I want the quality at the end of the job. That's the whole reason for doing this. So I'm going to spend a little time. The biggest part of the time is around the corners, around the edges, in this area. It just takes time. Now, a point I always try to make is when you're trying to learn a skill, and let's pretend it's golf. Well, we know it's easy. You take golf lessons and you're done. Or you find an instructor that works for you. But when you're trying to pass on information about painting, it's really a lot more. There's more challenging ways. There's a lot of ways to do it. Not every way works for every person. And the materials are constantly changing, so it's a really difficult skill to pass on. But it's worth it, because when you're done, and you know how to repair these old things, and you know how to do this kind of work, it's a dying skill. You're not going to find a lot of kids, they can't break away from their cell phone, so they're not going to be doing this kind of work. So it's kind of up to the older people to keep this skill alive as long as possible. And the people that do it with cars, they can make a good living doing it, so I guess they'll stay in business forever. But my whole point is, you don't really learn this skill from one person. You learn it from a network of people. And that network of people share information. I've learned from so many people, it's hard to even make a list. I know other people have learned from me. And by sharing it, you keep a skill like this alive. This is not going to be alive forever, that's for sure. It's a modern world, but I know there's still a lot of people around that, like myself, live in old houses, love old cars, old motorcycles, and like to know the skill and how to do these things. And this, what I'm passing on in the videos I send out every day, this is a skill that took me a long time, over 50 years to learn. So I hope you can pick something up from it too. Now, the final step on this is always, after all the flat areas get blocked, all the edges radius every time we do anything from the first step onward. And again, I'm not trying to sand off all the primer. Here's another point, something worth sharing. When you do this kind of sanding, if the paper is too rough, let's say you use, I'll just make a crazy example, you're going to use 180. If you use too rough of a grit, it leaves scratches that come through in the paint. And I don't want to see the scratches, of course. This is 600 and it's a unique 600. It sands beautifully, a lot nicer than other stuff that I've used. But if you don't detail sand this in the final thing, when you put the clear on, these little mistakes show right away. See, and I see them. Now, some people don't see them. Some people are perfectly willing to have a lower quality finish. That, of course, is fine. But when you want this to be, as I do, I always want everything perfect. And I get fussy about it. And the biggest thing is I'm willing to take the amount of time, and today's a good example. It's a rainy day. There's no rush to finish this. I'm going to take a ride to Gavin's later today. I'm going to pick out the yellow paint. That yellow paint is super critical. I have on my computer over 100 similar paint jobs, and what I did, I boiled them all down to I like this, I don't like that. I like this, I don't like that. And by doing that, if you make that yellow a little bit too white, it doesn't look like a Yamaha, it looks like a lemon. If you make it too dark, I don't know what it looks like, a pumpkin. It's really not as easy as you think it is until you go to do it. That same old thing I always say. Everybody's a great parent until they have children. Well, until you actually break down a bike and you're going to do this kind of work. But then once you do, you realize, wow, we're all in the same boat together, and by sharing the information, we all win. At the end of this project, of every step, the last thing, take my hand, and this is that great tip John Pothia gave me years ago. Just start, work the whole part, and you'll, right here I find one. You'll always find some little spot that's just you're not happy with it. Now, a couple of things. When I head down to Gavin's, this paint is, to me, it's the most critical part of the whole job, is to get this yellow to represent what is in my mind's eye as memories of year after year of looking at these race bikes that Kenny Roberts rode. And obviously Kenny Roberts did not ride an FZR, but what I'm trying to do with this paint job is put on that paint job from a different era onto a more modern bike, make it a unique, one-of-a-kind thing that has the look of maybe Yamaha really did make one of them. I don't want it to look like, you know, I want it to look like it could have come from the factory. Now I'm done sanding. I tack ragged it down. It's ready. Obviously we're not going to paint it today, but I wanted to show a couple little things I did. When I was sanding this, I see, ooh, there's a little flaw there. What I did, I turned it over. I wanted to show this, and I put a couple layers of thick CA on the back, just to reinforce it, make it a little bit stronger in case that's one of the. It could be hitting on something on the frame there or something. Who knows? But all these things, whenever I see. This has been reinforced so many times, and I'm sure we'll get away with that. This whole area is reinforced with extra carbon fiber. All of the areas are dressed off, and anywhere there's a radius, I've really spent a lot of extra time. But that's about the amount of primer I want to leave on. This is ready. The next step is we need to have a day ready to paint, and this pretty much is going to be ready for the white paint. So here's my point too, is to get the part from where this was a couple of weeks ago to where this is now. This is absolutely better right now than had I gone and just bought a new part, because I'd still have to do all the reinforcing. The only thing I would save is some of the paint stripping, and that was really not to me not a big deal, because this is the work that I do for I get a lot of satisfaction out of. I get a lot right now just looking at that part and then looking at this part, seeing them side by side. So as I'm getting ready to head out to Gavin's, is just one more little thing I could share here that might be of some value. Now Turbo Steve graciously, we're going to see his bike in the next couple days. We're going to be doing a little restoration work for him. The picture I had was a picture that was just of the motorcycle, and he put Kenny Roberts on it. So I thought that was pretty cool, and of course I keep that on my wall of, I don't know what, wall of old men here. Now in designing up my paint job, this is a typical bike from that era that I'm trying to capture the look of. But I want to have the look of a bike from this era on an FZR. Oh, this is not as easy as you might think. So what I did, I combed the internet, all the photo sites, downloaded, and I actually made a video. Somewhere on the channel there's a video of all these paint jobs, but I wanted to show how the paint job would change to a more modern bike. This is the more modern, they call it ladders, the black and white stripe going up and down the side of the bike. Yamaha used to call that their racing ladders. Now on the older bikes, they're square. They're actually square blocks. So that would have been very, very easy to lay out. Laying out the RD, the hardest part was lining up the tail section with the tank. But the more modern ladders like this, now this is a really critical thing, and we ran into this doing Mark's restoration on his FZ600. To line up the part that's painted on the fairing with the part that's painted on the tail section, if that line is off even a 64th of an inch, your eye catches it. So it's really difficult. It's really not as easy as you think. Again, if they don't line up, like some of the paint jobs on some of the Yamaha race bikes, they don't line up on purpose maybe, because the part of the fairing that would have the stripe and a part of the tail section, totally different. So that would make it a little bit easier, but see, we can't do that. The way the bike, the shape of the bike doesn't allow it to have those square blocks. It needs the more lean forward blocks. So keep in mind, this is all subjective and it's all in my mind's eye. Now see, here's somebody that did a Yamaha paint job, and I'm criticizing it only from my point of view. It's a beautiful job, but the yellow is too white. I prefer the more orange yellow, because that's what I remember from the bikes of that era when I saw them in real life. And he must have had a good job lining this up. All these things look so easy until you go to do them. So I decided what I do is, on the day that I line up the stripe, when I lay that out in tape, I do it in a dedicated day, put the bike out in the driveway if I could, if it's not snowing, lay out all the tape, and then look at it from every possible angle, shoot 1,000 pictures, and bring it down into the cellar. But I've been thinking about this for over a year already, so I'll probably get it wrong. Now the younger guys that look at my channel, they probably won't even know what those 4 things sticking out of the back are, when you don't have any, well, I got to see these bikes in real life. I got to hear them, and when I was doing my AMAR days, we didn't get to have a bike of this quality, but we got to see the expert riders of the day that really could ride them. Now here's another thing that's difficult to figure out ahead of time until they actually have the bike. On the factory bikes, there usually was some white. Now in this case, the person that laid out the paint job decided not to put the stripe on the tail section. So you have to kind of blend the paint job into the shape of the bike that you have to deal with. And how he put the Yamaha down low on a yellow stripe, these are all things I've considered, but again, it's all subjective, and I try to make it what I want. Now, from looking at it on my computer, this yellow is a little bit too orange. And I don't think it comes across actually when you, by the time it goes to taking pictures of your computer screen, but if the yellow is wrong, and that's why I'm going to Gavin's this afternoon, I'm going to supervise mixing the paint. Because I mixed the original paint that was on there, and it took me a long time. I had 10 different colors of yellow, and until I was happy with it. And the RD, I'm very happy with it. Now here's a more modern bike that somebody did a paint job of, that the white on the bottom. Now my only criticism, in fact this might even be you know, similar to the one I have, the striping is lower, so none of it appears on the tank. The paint job I laid out, the stripe goes right through the tank where your knees touch. So this is maybe a different Well, his mind's eye view of what he liked and mine, totally different. Now another thing, the thickness of the white bars is a critical thing. So I'm going to buy all the tape in various thicknesses and try it a little thicker or a little thinner. If it's too thick, I don't like it. If it's too thin, you lose the ladder look. And I think if you go to the internet sites where these pictures are available, there's thousands of them, and you can weed through them, and I always make a list of what I like and what I don't like, and then try to put all the things I like into my paint job. And the one thing about mixing yellow that I found from my little experiment, it's very easy to make it too light. One drop of white too much and it turns into, I don't know, a color that it's not a, it doesn't represent Yamaha. And if it's too dark by one drop, you can live with it. But boy, is it hard to get it right. And obviously I'm not the first one that ever tried to do this, is put up, you know, a factory race paint job on a custom bike or something similar, but difficult. It's, as I've gotten deeper and deeper into it, I realize it's a lot harder than it looks. So yeah, here's one where there's number plates on the back, stripe on the tank. Well, everybody has something that they like. And I had even in my wildest dream considered something like this, of flip-flopping the colors so that the bars were yellow. And then I looked at these photos and I saw, well, I wasn't the only one that thought about it, and well, I went back to wanting to have the factory paint work. And I know people like Vince and people that have a good eye for what's right and what's wrong with color. My wife Karen is a trained artist. Our house has 100 oil paintings hanging up. She will supervise me and keep me from going off the rails, I hope. And so my suggestion is, if you're looking to do something custom, or you have a picture in your mind's eye of what you'd like your custom work to look like, scour the internet. There's plenty of pictures, and you probably will get up some ideas. Now, things you like, things you don't like. Now see, when I looked at this the first time, and I have it, of course I'm not taking a picture of a picture, I looked, it would have been almost impossible to line up the tail section with the tank, unless you had the whole bike in one piece and you took plenty of time to do it. It looks like this bike is just a little bit off. Now, other people don't care. Maybe you wanted it off, but I'm only doing it from my perspective and my personal subjective taste. Now, if you were around motorcycling and involved in racing in this era when these bikes were pretty popular, during that era it would have left an impression on you that maybe at this point in your life, how many years later, you'd want to have one too. Now this is funny, from looking at this picture, it looks like this is the picture Turbo Steve photoshopped Kenny Roberts out and put him on my RD. I think that's pretty funny. And Steve, I do have that picture in the shop. And I even considered at one time, I know this is pretty funny, I even considered trying to make a Valentino Rossi replica like this, with all the decaling and everything. I just said, you know, it just, at some point in time, the red flag went up that ain't happening. And as you search pictures on the internet, on these sites, you notice my bike appears from time to time. But here's a point. When I had the cafe seat on it, and I put it on from time to time and take it off, and you know, and here the problem, it goes right on it with two cotter pins. The problem is that lining up that stripe, boy, the day I did that, I was out there just endlessly, because not only that, I wanted the bottom of the tank to match the bottom of the seat, and I didn't want anything not to be right, and it took so long to do that, but when it was done, well, you know, it made me real happy. And there's so many variations of those ladder paint jobs. I really do have a free hand to do something now that I've really been looking forward to for a long time. And as I've spent the time doing this, I realize I'm not the only one that ever tried to pull this off. And here's one with the stripe on the top of the tank. Again, so many choices. Now the modern R1s and R6s have this 60th anniversary paint job, And when I looked at this, the thing I really didn't float my boat. I don't like it. It's too much. There's no white here. It's black and yellow. It almost starts to look too much like a bumblebee. So I kind of got away from that right away. And anybody that's ever been to the shop knows that the screensaver on my computer is an Art Conklin photo that Art took. Anyway, just some information I thought's worth sharing. And believe me, the old RD is 41 years old. All the time I spent restoring it and painting it, worth every minute. Every time I ride this, I just turn into an 18-year-old kid, and I got to ride it yesterday. So Karen just yelled down to me, it's time to head out to Gavin's. It's a rainy day. It's about all we're going to get done today, but thinking about my paint job, getting that wet sanding done, we had a great day. And I'll be back tomorrow with the paint, I hope. So hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.